us to learn it and live for you. In your name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Benson. Well, good morning. I suppose you're probably as tired as I am, maybe a little tireder. So I'm reminded of something that one of the older ministers at our church used to do. And by the way, if you're sitting in sunshine, I don't mind at all if you get up and move. Looks like there's a few more spots, so feel free to move if you'd like. But he used to be able to look at the crowd and tell if somebody's a little sleepy, and he would just, in the middle of his sermon, he'd say, okay, let's just everybody stand. So I might try that today. We'll see. Hopefully I won't have to. I probably won't even notice. So I don't notice that much if you're sleeping. So you can try it if you want. So last night we ended talking about, are we going to love God, or are we going to fall for the temptation to kind of be like God? And the unlimited information and how that's kind of heady, and it makes us feel like we know a lot. The ease of communication, frictionless communication, like they just give us what we want to hear. It's so easy. We don't even have to go looking for it. They'll give it to us, right? And it can just feel like we're so wise. Endless entertainment, keeping us distracted from what God wants us to be involved in. Affirming algorithms, they just tell us the things that we want to hear, and it just kind of confirms that, I know what's going on. And I don't, anybody that disagrees with me, they're obviously, out there. Prediction markets, we talked about that just a little bit. The ability that we're going to have, we can, predict who's going to be the next president, or who's going to say avocado 3 times today, or whatever, anything. You could all kinds of prediction things, and it kind of makes us feel like maybe, we've got that inside scoop. We're a little bit sharper than the average bear. And the one that I didn't talk about was just this illusion of control. And I think this really, because relationships are hard work, and they're kind of risky. You don't know. You don't know how it's going to go. You might think, oh, I think this might be a good relationship, and you kind of go into it, and they don't reciprocate. Like, ooh, I feel kind of stupid, right? Have you ever felt stupid because you thought things were going to be a certain way, and they turned out not to be that way? Yeah, I had a time just a couple weeks ago. I was preaching at my uncle's, not preaching. I was doing the committal at my uncle's funeral. And I was very thankful for the opportunity. And my cousins, and they're roughly my age, over there with their mom, in the tent. And I'm out by the casket in the snow. It was very cold that day. And I actually remembered something that happened when I was about 10 or 11 years old. We were at my uncle's house. Our family lived in Florida. He lived in Ohio. And so we were visiting. And I was just a tad younger than some of the other cousins, and but I was able to play with them. Like they were letting me in their circle, and it just felt so good. I was enjoying it so much. And we were acting out some stories, and somebody made the suggestion, why don't we act these stories out for the adults? And this is really something. And I was actually part of it. And so my dad comes to the door and he says, hey, Danny, that was my name back then. You can ask me later about that. Are you ready to go? We need to go. And so I went over to Dad and I said, hey, Daddy, I think we're going to act out some stories. Can we stay a little longer? I really want to be in on this. And he was, oh, sure, that's fine. So he went back and sat down with the adults for a while. And, 15 minutes, 20 minutes later, the adults start calling from the living room, hey, are you guys going to act out those stories? Because Daddy had told the other adults, and we're going to act out stories. So, well, I'm not sure quite what happened, like if I just got my information wrong, or the way I've kind of remembered it is that my cousins all collapsed right then. Like they all of a sudden just bailed on me, you might say. So my Uncle Andy, the one whose funeral I was at, he came in and he said, hey, you guys want to come and do your stories? And my cousins all were like, act out stories? We weren't going to act out stories. What in the world? Where did you get that idea? And I remember just kind of slipping off and going into the van, and just this little boy, and I just felt so stupid and alone. Those things happen to us, right? I could remember that from 50 years later, almost 50 years later. It's pretty crazy the things we can remember. But in social media, I can control that better. I can control. Now, not totally. It's obviously not working very well because we have all this anxiety, but I have an illusion of control. Like, I can control who I'm going to relate to, how I'm going to portray myself, so I can paint myself however I want to. You know, I can touch up my appearance. I don't know if they have it yet where you can put hair on. But, like, it just feels like maybe you could control it. And that appeals to us, doesn't it? So, Nicholas Carr, this is Nicholas Carr about 10 years ago. And I'm sorry, it's kind of bright in here, so it's going to be a little bit harder for you to see, but you can probably see it better than I can. And one of the questions that is you're going to think maybe is, why am I quoting non-Christian social scientists, you might say? And so there's a bigger question there. Why aren't Christians leading the way on this, like the guy Jonathan Haidt, who wrote The Anxious Generation? I think he's probably an agnostic Jew or atheist. Why aren't there Christians saying this stuff? And I don't know what the answer is. I guess on one hand, as Christians, we don't have the existential fear that you would have if you thought this was all there was and that we were destroying ourselves, right? Because we know that ultimately we get to go be with God. So maybe we just don't have the fear. Or maybe we're naive. Or maybe there's a spiritual dimension. Like, Satan really, really, really likes it if Christians lose their perspective of why they're here, and they're not making much difference in the whole battle. And so I almost wonder if there isn't a spiritual element to it that makes or puts us kind of in the we're kind of behind stage in some ways, and that's the way Satan would like it. I don't know. I'll be glad to debate that with you or talk to you about it. But this is Nicholas Carr, who wrote the book The Shallows, and this interview is actually about 10 years old. I decided to do something from 10 years ago to kind of see what he was saying then, and did it actually happen, and then I'm going to have another video of him later as well.
All right, so I'm joined here by Nicholas Carr, the author of this new book, What the Internet is Doing to Our Brains. Nick, what is the Internet doing to my brain?
Well, it's changing. The more we stay online, the more we jump among bits of information and handle all sorts of incoming messages, the more we're training our brain to behave in that way, to be distracted, to jump around. And what we're losing, I think, and the science seems to suggest this, is the ability to slow down, to be contemplative, to be attentive, and to engage in the kind of deeper modes of thinking and reading that I think are really the essential to our intelligence and even our personality.
You think this is a shame. You wrote the article a few years ago, I think it was in The Atlantic, that said, is Google making me stupid?
Right.
So this is all making you, me, all of us stupid.
Well, I think it's making us more superficial. It's shifting the way we think, and it's making us quicker thinkers in some ways, but also more superficial, more shallow thinkers in other ways.
And you cite studies which show that the Internet is actually changing the size and shape of our brain.
Right. Something neuroscientists and psychologists have discovered in recent decades is that when we use new technologies, new media, they actually influence the very neural circuitry of our brain. So as we shift our habits of mind and spend more time with our iPhones or with our laptops and stuff, and we're really not only training our brains to think in a very distracted, very superficial way, but these changes are being embedded in the actual biological structure of our brains.
And we're losing what here exactly?
I think we're losing the deeper modes of thinking and reading that require attentiveness, that require the ability to concentrate, to tune out distractions.
The ability to pick up a book quietly and read it for a few hours and lose yourself completely.
Right. And it's not only book reading, it's to sit down and pay attention to one thing for a long period of time.
So that was 10 years ago, roughly, and is that, like, was there like a curve and we went back the other way in the last 10 years? We realized what's going on and we're no longer allowing ourselves to be distracted. We can all read well. I mean, I'm hoping that you can read, and I hope that you'll keep that as a discipline. But I would say in general, the things that he said have come to pass, and actually are more true today than they were then. Like the shallow thinking, not being able to really think deeply about things. This is Tristan Harris again. He says, technology has infused itself at the very intimate level of how we form our identity, how we form relationships, how we make choices, and make sense of the world. Social media and the smartphone have allowed the influence and manipulation of human biases and weaknesses. They can overwhelm our psychology in ways that we simply aren't aware of. The prevalent business models in technology are entirely based on manipulating human weaknesses. And I told you last night how, because we set up social media as a business model, meaning the incentive is money, and the way to get the money is to keep you and I looking. They have, there's people, in suits in big rooms that are just trying to figure out how to keep you looking. They want, and me, I'm not leaving myself out of this. So here's just stats on addiction, and I think this is actually a little bit old. I think it's actually probably worse than that, because this says that 22 years, it's 40% of people say that they would be addicted, and then it slowly goes down. But on this next statistic, it actually says that 46% say that they're addicted to their phone. 56% use their phone while eating dinner. I'm assuming you're not one of those statistics. 84% check their phone within the first 10 minutes of waking up. 68% use their phone on the toilet. 29% look at their phone while driving. 40% look at their phone on a date. Now, ladies, and men, if she or he looks at a phone on your first date, that's a good sign. I mean, it's a sign you know what to do, right? All right, so there's a decent amount of talk when you're talking about technology in the brain about the prefrontal cortex. It's that front part of your brain. It's the kind of the executive role of the brain. It's where decisions are made. So it's the part that is part of our self-control, planning for the future, decision-making, problem-solving, emotional regulation. It's like where we control our emotions, and rational thought. All of those things are in the prefrontal cortex. And Robert Sapolsky in The Great Courses says the frontal cortex makes you do the harder thing when it is the right thing to do. And that's kind of interesting. Do the harder thing when it's the right thing to do. There's not a person in here that I would doubt their sincerity or their desire to follow God. But the question is, for all of us, is will I do the harder thing when it's the right thing to do? And this is really crucial to our development as followers of Christ. It's what gives us the ability for rational thought and decision making. It actually takes about 25 plus years for the prefrontal cortex to fully develop. Sorry, I don't know how that strikes you, but I could assume that your prefrontal cortex is probably not fully developed yet. And anecdotally, meaning my own experience, I'm not trying to make some kind of scientific, but I would say that in my mid to late 20s, there were some things that kind of came together for me. I started really appreciating the authorities in my life more than I had before. I realized that my dad was not as dumb as I thought he was earlier. I started actually being able to realize that, the way I felt in the morning when I got up, with my head hurting. And we actually, when Anita and I were first married, I had an alarm clock. I mean, I don't know how long I did this, for years probably, but the alarm clock was across the room, right? And I would stagger over there and hit the snooze and go back to bed. And I'd do that multiple times. It was pathetic. And so somewhere there in my mid to late 20s is actually when I started realizing that, it actually does make a difference when you go to bed the night before. I never really put that together. Like, what? How does this work? But if you go to bed, if you try to get 8 hours of sleep, then you kind of feel more like getting up the next morning. And one of the ways that we solved that problem way back then was Juanita started running the alarm clock. So she would tell me when it was time to get up, and then if I didn't get up, I was actually making so she couldn't sleep anymore. So bringing that human relation factor into it actually helped me, and I was actually able to get up. I'm kind of embarrassed to say that, but that's also about the time in my life that I started really consistently reading the Bible through regularly and having more of a significant devotional time. So you could say, oh, well, it doesn't matter. I'm not going to make rational decisions now anyway because my prefrontal cortex isn't completely developed. So here's what I would say. You have something good to look forward to. Like maybe the difficulty making those rational decisions isn't going to be quite as hard later as it is right now. So that's a blessing. But another thing, I would encourage you not to make emotional decisions about church, about where I'm going to go to church or whatever, until you get a little further along, because there's two things that are going to happen. First of all, your prefrontal cortex, I can't even say it, but anyway, whatever that thing is going to keep developing and maturing. And you'll be able to make decisions more, not based so much just on emotion, but on what is the right thing to do. And the second thing that's going to happen is you'll have the opportunity to watch what your friends do and see where they go and the decisions they make and how it affects them. And it'll help you make better decisions. So just hang on a little bit. Here are some warning signs that your prefrontal cortex might be stressed. And actually, they're saying there's actually in brains today, there's white matter in that area that's like we're not actually using it. We're not actually using the prefrontal cortex. So difficulty sustaining attention on single tasks without checking devices. So easy to just pull it out, right? Impulsivity, doing things impulsively. Now that's normal for young people, but technology can actually ratchet that up, where you're really having a hard time making the best decision because of impulsivity. Or reduced working memory capacity, forgetting what you were doing. And I think it is interesting. I think young people do struggle. I mean, this is kind of an old person's thing, Old people think more about heaven, the hereafter, because they go into rooms and they think, what was I hereafter? That was kind of lame. All right. I'll try to do better. Either that or you're sleepy and took a while. Organizational challenges that maybe like you used to be able to do better and now you're having a little bit more difficult time with it. Or emotional dysregulation, anxiety when separated from your device. These are signs that the prefrontal cortex is, or sleep disruption, like you're not making good decisions about when to go to sleep, right? It's probably better for all of us if we're not on digital devices an hour before we go to sleep, right? I mean, that's the science, but it's hard for us to actually do that. And then we're tired, and when you're tired, you don't make the best decisions. Someone asked me years ago to preach a sermon at a funeral on Isaiah 40, where where, and I'm just going to do this by memory, you can check me out and make sure, but where he says, why do you think that your cause is hidden from God? Why do you say, O Israel, my cause is hidden from God? Like God doesn't see what's going on. And his only answer is kind of like Job, God answering Job. But his only answer is to ask, does God ever get tired? I mean, people get tired. Even young men grow weary, it says. But does God get tired? He never gets tired. And I can tell you, some of the times that I messed up as a parent, like making wrong decisions, rash decisions, maybe coming down too harsh or maybe not coming down when I should, is when I was tired. Tiredness does affect us. It does make so that we don't make the best decisions. All right, so I got this from Harry Argo, and you can see this other places too. Questions are maybe a little bit different, but it's true. There's questions that the brain is always asking. And it's almost like this fight or flight thing, like subconsciously we're always thinking about, maybe in a sense, self-protection. So, first time you see something, what is it? What is it? You look at it. Let's say that, the door opened and a horse walked in. You would think, what is it? Oh, it's a horse. Why? How do you know it's a horse? Well, because your brain also does memory matching. Like it thinks about, oh yeah, I've seen something like that before, 4 legs and the ears and all. And that's a horse. And so then your brain can kind of relax if you're able to match it with a memory. So what is it? How does it work? And the last question is, do I care? Like, is it going to hurt me? Do I care? So even when you walked in today, you saw all kinds of things. Your brain saw them, your eyes saw them, you saw the lights, you saw the ceiling. But because of memory matching, you probably didn't pay a lot of attention to it, right? You're not scared to be here, I suppose. It's not like you're comfortable with it because you've seen it before, and your brain. It's kind of like when you drive sometimes, and all of a sudden you realize, I don't really know how I got here. I haven't really been paying attention. But your brain is able to kind of make those connections. Can you remember the first week of term, all the new people? And you think about that. What is it? I mean, who is it? What do I remember their name? Are they safe? Do I care? And so your brain is constantly working, and you're kind of tired. I mean, it's tired. Even for extroverts, being around people does tire you out eventually, right? I mean, I'm kind of an extrovert. I enjoy being with people, but I still get tired because my brain, like your brain is just working constantly. What is it? How does it work? And does it matter to me? Or can I just discard it? So what happens when you, like, especially for children, if the memory matches, the memories they have are not realistic. Like they have a lot of images in their brain that aren't really realistic. But they're going back and they're saying, oh yeah, that person just flew from here to there. Yeah, I'm okay with that. No, that's an unrealistic memory. It's from some movie or whatever. And I think that it's important for us that our memories are realistic, but also that we recognize that constant exposure to new things can make us tired. And so there's a phrase called digital crowding, which means like before you ever left your bedroom, you were tired of people because you spent so much time online already. And so you don't really even want to be with the people you're with because you're already kind of tired of people. Digital crowding. Kind of compare that story to the story of Abraham when the Lord and 2 angels came to visit Abraham, and they were talking about Sodom and Gomorrah, and Abraham pleads for Sodom, if at least there's five righteous people there. Abraham was sitting in his tent door was he having like tons and tons and tons of images and what is it? What is it? My brain's working. What is it? What is it? No, all of a sudden these three men walk by and he goes, what is it? And and he jumps up and runs out and says, hey, come in here and I'm going to make you a meal. And he goes and kills the calf. Do you understand like the difference in the level of distraction that Abraham had at that moment? It was quite different. So we do memory matching in order for us to kind of make sense of our world, to kind of help our brain not have to be running all the time. What is it? What is it? What is it? What is it? Does it matter? How does it work? Doesn't matter. So there are different things you could do, and I'm just going to quickly look at this because I don't want to spend too much time on it. But if you do some kind of time blocking, which I think would be helpful, just to kind of slow your brain down so your brain doesn't have to work quite so hard, or have device-free zones. Like there's a lot of secular people that are saying don't have your phone in your bedroom, don't let it be the first thing you check. They're not even saying get up and read your Bible, which they should be, but that's not what they're saying. They're saying maybe do some kind of meditation or something. Don't check your phone the first of the morning. But as Christians, there's a lot of us that's the first thing we do, and we really have a difficult time having meaningful devotions. That's a huge deal for us as Christians. I mean, secular people, they're trying to keep their brain from being overworked, and they're really worried about it. There's kind of this existential threat. Or disable non-essential notifications, or use paper, use face-to-face conversations when possible. And we'll look at communication a little bit more later. This is Jonathan Haidt, and I just have a short clip from him. He's kind of describing what he sees happening just in the last 10 or 15 years.
What I've learned while writing the book, I began by focusing on social media. But I now see that it's not just social media. It's what I've been calling the phone-based childhood. So for all of human history, for millions of years, all mammals play. Mammal childhood is about building up your brain, you do that through play. Anyone who's had a puppy knows it's all about play. So we had play-based childhoods up until around 2010. I've seen data in Britain. I can't remember the exact numbers, but something like 60% of British kids in 2009, 2010, 60% used to go over to a friend's house sometimes each week. And then by 2015, that had dropped to something like 20%. I may be wrong on the numbers, but the thing is, kids used to actually see each other in person. And once they all got phones and loaded the social media for the girls, it's video games for the boys, childhood stops being play-based, which is what a mammal brain needs to wire up properly. It stops being play-based, it becomes phone-based, where phone includes video game consoles, all the stuff that makes your social interactions virtual, often asynchronous, disembodied, transitory. So it's a complete, what I'm calling it, the great rewiring of childhood. It happened between 2010 and 2015. It hit the U.S., Canada, Britain, Australia, New Zealand, exactly the same way. New Zealand's a little bit later, but the U.S., UK, Canada are exactly in lockstep with what happened to our kids' mental health.
Right. Now, does the research say anything?
He's obviously evolutionary in his thinking. He talks about the mammal brain, compares us to a puppy, right? But he's talking about that we're talking about a specific period of time, like between 2010 and 2015, there's been a major shift in the way children are growing up. And in some ways, I don't know how you grew up. I don't know if your parents held out or, if they let you have a phone when you were 15. If they let you have a phone when you were 15, I would just say, I'm sorry. Because I don't think that was a great idea, especially for a guy, especially an unlimited or unfiltered phone. I've talked to too many guys that, their parents let them have a phone. And of course, I realize at 15, you're begging for a phone and, all my friends have it and all of that. But I actually hold parents somewhat responsible for that because I don't think a 15-year-old with his undeveloped prefrontal cortex is really going to make the best decisions always. And if you have anonymity, unlimited access, whatever else, it's going to be very difficult. And there's a lot of young guys that are in bondage because of those decisions. Now, I am hopeful and optimistic that you're going to raise your family with more awareness of the consequences of technology. I think kind of what happens with all like changes in technology or any kind of invention, we tend to see it as a positive. And it has mostly been a positive over the years. It's very interesting. This is an interesting time for us. For example, for years and years and years, like every generation wanted to have a little bigger house than the generation before it, right? Like I don't want a house as small as my parents. I want a little bigger house. And it just bigger is better. But we've kind of peaked on that, haven't we? Not everybody thinks I have to have as big a house as my parents anymore. And it's almost not possible. So in some ways, bigger is better. That idea of progress has peaked. And in some ways, inventions always, the net progress outweighs anything that we lost. So when we went from a hoe to a tractor, was there a loss? Like we used to, garden, we used to farm with a hoe, and we got a tractor. Or I guess we went to horses first, and then tractor. I guess we use horses. So is there a loss between hoeing and, today where you don't even have to drive the tractor, right? Is there any loss?
Physical exercise.
Yeah. So there is physical exercise. So now we have to go to the gym, or we have to, work out at home, do our sit-ups and push-ups. It used to not be a thing. You didn't have to worry about it because you worked hard every day and you didn't need that. But would we want to go back? No. The net gain, I'm not going back. I like tractors. I like technology in general is a good thing. But do you think that maybe we're peaking on the net gain? I don't know. I mean, it's just something to think about there. It's interesting. This is the book that Jonathan Haidt wrote. And one of the things he really, he's really big on a few things. You kind of heard some of it there. And by the way, this book is actually it's been fairly significant. It just came out a couple of years ago. But because of this book, Australia just implemented a law saying that children under 16 couldn't use social media. Now, I don't know how that's going to work. It's kind of an interesting concept, and there was rioting in the streets, of course. But he is somewhat hopeful that maybe we will have and we could talk about that. And in some ways, it doesn't matter to us. Because of human nature, I'm not sure that you can make a rule and it's going to fix everything. But it is something that it's getting a lot of airtime right now. I mean, if you'd go on NPR just a couple of days ago, there was an interview with Jonathan Haidt, and he's in the news a lot right now. But there's about 5 different things that he talks about. He talks about the power of unstructured play. He thinks that kids should go outside, and they don't as much now, right? They're not playing as much. They need to play outside without digital devices. We need to maximize real-life connections, encourage risk-taking. He makes a lot, if you read his book, he makes a big deal about risk-taking. We don't take risk anymore. People are scared to take risk. Why? What's going on? Why are people scared to take risk? Sometimes, even in our circles, guys are afraid to take the risk of, starting a relationship. Why? What's causing that? And maybe it's the girl's fault. We could have a big argument about that. We won't. But the whole thing of risk-taking is really kind of fascinating, and I'm going to delve into this just a little bit, not very long. But this is a rate of the testosterone levels are going down in all the developed countries. This is U.S., New Zealand, Australia, England, Netherlands, Europe. So Western civilization countries that testosterone levels peaked and then they're heading down. The question is why? Because testosterone levels are important to risk-taking as well. It's part of God's way of developing us as men and helping us to be willing to be leaders and take risks. But it's actually, the actual levels are going down. Why? It's kind of nice that risk-taking behavior is on its way down. There's less crime among teenagers. There's less alcohol use. There's less smoking, except for e-cigarettes. There's less fornication among teenagers than there used to be. So why? What's going on? Like they're not getting in trouble like they used to. And I'm not talking about you, because you wouldn't get in trouble. I'm talking about non-Christians. So some of it could be just less face-to-face interaction. Everybody's holed up in their house, maybe in their basement. They're on their digital screens. So friends can be a bad influence. And I mean, you could go out with your friends and somebody could suggest doing something stupid, and then the rest of you go along with it, but it also could be that everybody's just kind of glued to their digital devices, playing video games or other social media, video games for guys, he said, social media for girls, and there's no time left to act up. We're just distracted to where we're not very. But also there is kind of this delayed initiation to adulthood. Like it used to be that at 13 you had to do a man's work. That's how it was. Like there wasn't this awkward, long place called a teenager, where you'd like to have adult freedoms, but you're not really ready for adult responsibilities. It used to not be like that. It used to be the transition was a little cleaner, and so is that one of the reasons? Does that play into it at all? Even people getting driver's license. When I turned 16, I got my driver's license on the day I turned 16. There was no waiting around. And I realize today there's a lot of people that it's not that big a deal to them. Or, getting a job. People are probably not quite as likely to just go out and, take a job that really requires a lot. Or leaving home or getting married. These are all things that are being delayed because we don't want to take risk, and is it tied to hormone decline? So here's some things that might be connected to like lower levels of testosterone. Obesity, that's going to affect testosterone. People that if you're overweight, you're going to tend to, and sedentary habits like just sitting around, it's going to affect it. Poor diet, nutrition deficiencies. Environmental toxins. I don't know how far to go down this path, but some people think it's the plastic that we're using. It's lowering testosterone. I don't know. Sleep deprivation and stress. So it's very interesting. When I was young, sleep was not a problem, and I didn't understand. Older people saying, "How did you sleep?" But actually, this is an issue for young people today, right? It's an issue. Young people don't sleep as well. Now, maybe you do, but I'm saying in general, there's less like good 8 hours of sleep a night kind of life. There's all kinds of chronic illness, medications people are taking, and it really seems like in some ways the aging process is accelerated. And I wonder if that even ties into like a loss of innocence, like young children have an innocence, and they're losing that much earlier. And I wonder if that's just kind of aging us. The whole thing is kind of aging us. And I would just like to say I want to go on record here saying that we really need male leadership. I'm not saying that technology isn't affecting females or you ladies. I think it is. I think you understand some of the social media stuff. But for male leadership, I think it's so important. This is God's plan, and you can see why Satan would want to try to attack the church right at this level. If we can have men that aren't really willing to grow up, aren't really willing to take on responsibility, aren't really willing to lead out in families. I mean, I'm not saying everybody has to be married, but don't you think that that is one of the primary ways that discipleship and the next generation of Christians, where that comes from? It comes from men leading out, being willing to take risks, and then guiding their families. So there's the wasted time, the sedentary lifestyles that kind of make us more passive, and the fear of risk-taking that goes along with that. In video games, you can kind of control it more. Again, that illusion of control. But real life, it's kind of hard to control it. What if she says no? And she's probably more likely to say no today, right? Because she wants to marry Jesus. I don't know what all the reasons are for her wanting to say no, but I'm just saying it's a little scary to take risks, right? And I'm not just talking about dating, but I do think one of the things that's happening is then we have passive men and frustrated women, and women kind of see men as the problem. And in our culture, men are seen as the problem. And as Frank Reed would say, who by the way is Kurt Burkholder's grandpa, Frank Reed would say, men are the problem, and men are also the solution. And I think that is so true, that God's desire is to see humble, dependent, when we say dependent, not dependent on parents, dependent on God, surrendered, relational. They're pursuing relationships. They're not just taking the easy path, of I'm not going to really pursue relationships because that hurts. I mean, this can happen all through your life. You could just wait till you have teenage children. And your teenage children, you actually get the feeling from them that they think you're old and kind of dumb. And what are you going to do with that? Are you going to back off and say, oh, I'm not going to, no, I'm not going to pursue that relationship. No, we're going to keep pursuing those relationships. We're going to be relationally intentional. Pursue our relationship with God. Pursue our relationship with our families. And I mean, this is true for ladies as well. He wants to see us focused on relationships. So the question is, do I love God with all my heart, soul, mind, and strength? Do I love my neighbor as myself? Or do I want to be God and kind of control my environment? All right, I will turn it back over to Benson. Thank you very much.